Hey guys, tonight we are stepping through a gate you can only pass through once. We are going deep inside one of history's most exclusive, most secretive, and let's be honest, most psychologically intense communities ever, the Ōoku, the forbidden women's quarters of the Japanese Shogun's castle. This was a world so cut off, so full of intrigue and silent battles, that frankly, you'd be lucky to survive your first week, let alone rise through the ranks. The rules for etiquette alone were a minefield. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you are listening from tonight, so drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey begins not with a grand entrance, but with a quiet, irreversible goodbye. The air outside the castle walls is thick with the smells of Edo Dam perf, charcoal smoke, the distant scent of the fish market. You take one last look at your family. Their faces are a mixture of pride and a deep, unspoken sorrow. Your mother grips your hand, her palm rough from a life of work. You are now leaving forever. There are no dramatic, weeping farewells. Everything is restrained, held in, as is the custom. But in her eyes, you see the truth. She is mourning you as if you have already passed from this world. You are about to enter the Ōoku, the great interior, and for a woman of your station, there is no coming back. You are placed inside a palanquin, a small, enclosed box carried on the shoulders of servants. The doors slide shut, and the world outside is reduced to muffled sounds and rhythmic swaying. It's dark and confining, a tiny, mobile prison that serves as a perfect introduction to your new life. Through the slats, you catch fragmented glimpses of the city, but soon, even those disappear as you pass through the massive outer gates of Edo Castle. The sounds of the bustling city fade, replaced by the crunch of gravel under the carriers' feet and the clipped, formal calls of unseen guards. After what feels like an eternity, the palanquin is set down, the door slides open, and you have to shield your eyes from the sunlight. You are standing in a courtyard before a building that is elegant but imposing. This is it, the entrance to the Ōoku, and it is not just one door, but a series of gates and corridors, a labyrinth designed to confuse and control. The most famous of these is the unclean gate, the Ōoku, the only entrance and exit for most service-related matters. For you, it is a one-way door. As you step across the threshold, the air itself seems to change. It is warmer, stiller, and heavily scented with expensive incense and polished cypress wood. The noise of the outside world is completely gone. A profound silence hangs in the air, broken only by the soft rustle of silken, the whisper-quiet footsteps of women gliding over the wooden floors. This is the first and most jarring rule of the Ōoku, the near-total absence of man. The only adult male permitted to cross this boundary is the shogun himself. Everyone else, from the highest-ranking lady-in-waiting to the lowest kitchen maid, is female. This fact alone makes the Ōoku one of the most unique social experiments in history. A sprawling city of thousands of women living in a society built entirely by and for themselves. You are immediately met by a group of older women, their faces unreadable masks of formal indifference. They are the gatekeepers, and their inspection is thorough. Your simple belongings are taken and meticulously searched. You, too, are inspected not just for weapons, but for any forbidden items from the outside. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of this security is the rumored absolute ban on anything male. This obsession was so extreme. Some tales insist that even male cats were forbidden from the premises, leading to a constant and sometimes comical struggle with pests. While this might be an exaggeration, it speaks to the paranoia that governed this gilded cage. You are stripped of your old clothes, the last physical connection to your former life, and given a simple, uniform-like kimono. Your name, the one your parents gave you, is also taken. From now on, you will be called by a new name, one assigned to you, marking you as a part of this institution. You are no longer an individual, but a function, a role to be filled. Historians still debate the motivations that brought women here. For the daughters of high-ranking samurai, it was a political duty and a potential path to immense power for their clan. For poorer families, sending a daughter to the Ōoku was a way to secure financial stability, a respectable if confining career. Whether they were ambitious players in a political game or little more than beautifully packaged commodities is a question whose answer is lost in the silent corridors you now find yourself walking down. You follow your guide, your soft-soled tabi socks making no sound on the gleaming floor, past endless painted screens depicting serene landscapes that feel like a cruel joke. Women pass you in the halls, their faces perfect ovals of white makeup, their expressions blank. They look at you, and through you, another new girl who has just stepped into the most beautiful prison in all of Japan. The woman leading you says nothing. Her silence is a statement in itself, a lesson in the economy of words that governs this place. You walk, and walk, and walk. The initial impression of a single, large building shatters. This is not a house. It is a city district, compressed and folded in on itself. The Ōoku is a sprawling complex of interconnected corridors, private apartments, grand halls, courtyards, and gardens, all sealed away from the outside world. It is a labyrinth of polished wooden paper screens. The main corridor, the Osuzi, Uroka, or Great Bell Corridor, stretches on for what seems like an impossible distance. It gets its name from a bell system used to announce the shogun's approach, a sound that would send ripples of panic and preparation through the entire community. You pass countless sealed doors, each leading to the private quarters of women whose rank you can only guess at. You see vast kitchens, larger than any village gathering hall, where steam billows from enormous pots of rice and the air is thick with the scent of simmering daikon and miso. An army of lower-ranked women moves with practiced efficiency, their movements a silent, well-rehearsed ballet. You pass by storehouses filled with bolts of silk, lacquerware, and porcelain, enough to supply a small town. You hear the rhythmic clatter of looms from a dedicated weaving wing, where intricate fabrics are made exclusively for the Ōoku's high-ranking residents. It is a completely self-sufficient world. Everything the women could possibly need, food, clothing, medicine, entertainment, is produced or provided within these walls. This self-sufficiency is both a luxury and the most crucial element of their imprisonment. They need nothing from the outside world, so there is no reason to ever leave. The sheer number of women is dizzying. They are everywhere. Young girls tasked with running messages, their footsteps a soft patter on the wood floors. Older, severe-looking women who seem to be supervisors, their sharp eyes missing nothing. Groups of ladies in waiting, identifiable by their slightly more elaborate kimono, whispering behind delicate fans. How many people live here? You try to count, but it is impossible. It feels like thousands. Historians themselves are still in a heated debate over the true population of the Ōoku at its zenith during the height of the Tokugawa shogunate. Some sensationalist accounts claim numbers as high as 6,000 or 7,000, a figure that is likely a wild exaggeration. More sober academic estimates place the number closer to 1,000 to 3,000, but even at the lower end of that estimate, it is a staggering concentration of people, all living under one continuous roof, their lives intertwined and inescapable. What is more unsettling than the scale is the security. This city of women is also a fortress. Every few hundred feet, you pass a checkpoint, a small station manned by stern-faced female guards. These are the Hiroshi Kibanen, the female castle guards who patrol the interior. They don't carry swords, but their authority is absolute. They watch you pass, their gaze lingering, logging your presence in this new section. This internal security system was incredibly complex. A fascinating and often overlooked detail is the system of the non-Atsugu-kai, or the seven mouths. These were seven-specific entrances and exits connecting the Ōoku to the rest of the castle, but they were not for general use. Each gate was designated for people of a specific rank or purpose. One for the shogun, another for high-ranking officials on approved business, another for deliveries, and so on. This system wasn't just for security, it was a physical manifestation of the rigid hierarchy, where you were allowed to walk to find who you were. As you are led deeper into the complex, you start to understand the layout is not just designed for living, it is designed for control. The endless, identical-looking corridors are meant to disorient. The lack of clear sightlines to the outside world is meant to isolate. The constant presence of others is meant to enforce conformity. There is no privacy here. The walls are literally made of paper. A raised voice, a careless word, a sob in the night, nothing goes unheard. You feel 1,000 pairs of eyes on you. The new arrival. Every woman you pass is assessing you, enticing you, calculating your potential as a friend, a rival, or an irrelevance. The silence you first noticed is not peaceful. It is watchful. It is the silence of a predator's den, where everyone is waiting for someone else to make a mistake. Finally, your guide stops before another simple, sliding door, distinguishable from the dozens you have already passed. She gestures for you to enter. This will be your home, a small space shared with several other new arrivals. But as you look back down the long, gleaming corridor you just traversed, you realize the physical map of this place is the least of your worries. The real challenge will be navigating the invisible map of power, favor, and etiquette that is far more complex and far more dangerous than any wooden labyrinth. You have seen the cage. Now you must learn its rules. The room you are assigned is stark and bare. A stark contrast to the opulent screens and lacquered beams you glimpsed in the main halls. A few woven tatami mats cover the floor, their fresh, grassy scent a small comfort. There are no decorations, no personal touches. You will sleep here, side by side with other girls, their bodies just a few feet away. Your space is defined by a single sleeping quilt and a hard wooden pillow. This is the bottom. Your education begins immediately. An older woman, whose title you later learn is Ochuro, or a mid-level servant, is assigned to instruct you and the other new arrivals. She is not unkind, but her patience is clearly finite. Her first lesson is not about your duties, but about how to exist, how to walk, how to sit, how to speak. Every single action is codified. You learn that you must not walk in the center of the corridors. That space is reserved for those of higher rank. You must walk near the walls, your head slightly bowed, your steps so quiet they are almost inaudible. You learn the art of sitting sei-izie, kneeling with your legs folded beneath you, your back perfectly straight. You must be able to hold this position for hours without fidgeting, without showing any sign of discomfort. It is a posture of submission, a physical reminder of your lowly status. The first few days are agony. Your legs cramp, your ankles burn, but you dare not move. The instructor's sharp glance is enough to quell any thought of relief. Then comes the language. The Ōoku has its own dialect, a highly formal and complex version of Japanese known as Nyobokotoba, or court lady language. Common words are replaced with elegant, indirect euphemisms. You don't say rice, you say the honorable grain. You don't refer to the toilet. You use a poetic term for a distant corner of the garden. To use a common word is to reveal yourself as coarse and uneducated. A fatal mistake. You are given lists of words to memorize, and you practice them with the other girls in hushed tones at night. Saying the wrong thing is not just embarrassing. It is a violation of the social order. One of the most mind-bogglingly complex sets of rules governs bowing. There is not just one bow. There are dozens, each minutely calibrated to the person you are addressing in the specific situation. A shallow nod for an equal, a deeper bow for a superior, a full prostration for head touching the tatami mat. For the highest-ranking women, you must learn to recognize rank on sight by the color of a kimono sash, the style of a hairpin, the number of attendants a woman has. Making a mistake, offering a bow that is too shallow or too deep, is a grave insult that could earn you a severe punishment. This obsession with etiquette reached its peak with the serving of food. A particularly strange and little-known ritual was the practice of ensagarai, the removal of meal trays. When a high-ranking woman finished eating, her trays could not simply be picked up. A lower-ranked servant had to approach on her knees, bowing repeatedly, and then, without ever turning her back to the dignitary, she had to slide backwards out of the room, pulling the trays with her. This could mean shuffling backwards for a considerable distance down a long hallway, a task that was both physically awkward and intensely humiliating. Historians see this not just as etiquette, but as a form of psychological conditioning, constantly reinforcing the immense gap between the ranks. You spend your days practicing these rituals until they become second nature. You learn to move like a ghost, to speak in riddles, to fold your body into a posture of perfect humility. It feels less like training and more like the breaking of a horse. Your old self, the girl who ran through fields and spoke her mind, is being systematically erased. She is being replaced by a creature of the Ōoku, a silent, graceful automaton who understands her place. The pressure is immense. The older women watch you constantly, their eyes like hawks. A misplaced foot, a dropped cup, a moment of eye contact held too long, every error is noted. The punishments are not typically physical. Instead, they are social and psychological. You might be ignored for a day, given the most unpleasant chores, or publicly shamed for your clumsiness. In a world where your entire existence depends on social standing, this is a fate worse than a beating. You realize that these rules, as suffocating as they are also your armor. To master them is to become invisible, and in the Ōoku, invisibility is a form of safety. Some historians have argued that this incredibly rigid system was not just about control, but also about creating a predictable, stable environment to counteract the intense emotional and political volatility simmering just beneath the surface. Whether it was a brilliant system of social engineering or just institutionalized paranoia is a matter of debate. But for you, it is simply the price of survival. You drill the bows, you memorize the vocabulary, and you learn to make yourself small, hoping to disappear into the woodwork of this beautiful, terrifying prison. After weeks of relentless training, you are finally assigned your official role. You were not destined for the glamorous, high-stakes world of the Shogun's consorts. Not yet. Anyway, you are to be a genin, one of the lowest-ranking servants. Your world shrinks to the service areas of the Ōoku, the kitchens, the laundry rooms, and the endless, winding corridors that need constant cleaning. Your days become a blur of repetitive, back-breaking labor. You wake before dawn, when the air is still cold and the paper screens are slick with dew. Your first task is to begin the endless cycle of cleaning. You, along with dozens of other girls, get down on your hands and knees with damp rags and polish the wooden floors of the hallways. You must rub until the cypress-wood gleams, reflecting the light like a dark mirror. It is meticulous, exhausting work. You learn to move in sync with the other girls, a silent team of cleaners, your movements rhythmic and efficient. Then it is on to the kitchens, a chaotic world of steam, smoke, and sharp-tongued head cooks. You wash mountains of vegetables, scale fish until your hands are raw, and scrub enormous iron pots. The hierarchy here is just as rigid as in the main halls. The head cooks command their subordinates with an iron fist, and a single mistake like overcooking the rice can result in a torrent of verbal abuse. You learn to stay quiet, keep your head down, and do exactly as you are told. The sheer scale of the provisioning is hard to comprehend. Every day, massive quantities of rice, fish, vegetables, and charcoal are delivered to the Ōoku's service gates. A curious and often overlooked aspect of this was the intense security around these deliveries. Mail suppliers were never allowed inside. They brought their goods to a specific checkpoint, where they were received and inspected by a designated group of older, less marriageable female servants. These women, known as the Omotizuyukai, were the bridge to the outside world, and they held a surprising amount of informal power. They were the ones who checked for hidden messages, contraband, or even poison. The Ōoku was terrified of contamination, both literal and metaphorical. Your place in this vast machine is minuscule. You are a cul, easily replaceable. You see the higher-ranking women only from a distance. You might catch a glimpse of a churro mid-rank attendant hurrying down a corridor on an important errand. Her silk kimono, a splash of vibrant color in the drab service hallways. Or you might see an entourage of J-Oro high-ranking ladies in waiting gliding towards the shogun's residential quarters. Their faces serene masks of white powder, their conversation a low, musical murmur you are not meant to hear. To you, they are like beings from another planet. They live in a world of poetry, incense games, and political maneuvering. Your world is one of splintered hands, aching backs, and the constant, gnawing fear of making a mistake. The social ladder seems impossibly tall, its rungs infinitely far apart. You are, at the very bottom, looking up at a sky full of stars you can never hope to reach. Yet, even here at the bottom, the hierarchy is fiercely defended. There are ranks even among the genin. There are the kitchen maids, the cleaning maids, the laundry maids, and those who attend to the lesser ladies. You quickly learn who you can speak to, who you must defer to, and who is, impossibly, even lower on the totem pole than you are. Alliances are formed over scrubbing brushes and laundry tubs. Friendships are forged in shared exhaustion and quiet complaints whispered late at night when you are all huddled under your thin quilts. These friendships are your only solace. You learn the other girls' stories, or at least the parts of them they are willing to share. One girl was sent from a poor samurai family that could no longer afford to keep her. Another was an orphan, sold to the castle by her village. You are all prisoners of circumstance, bound together by your shared fate. Historians are still trying to piece together the daily lives of these lowest-ranking servants, as official records mostly concern themselves with the high-born ladies. Much of what we know comes from anecdotal accounts, diaries kept in secret, and later, memoirs published after the Ōoku was disbanded. These sources paint a picture of a life that was incredibly harsh, but not entirely without agency. These women developed their own subculture, their own codes of conduct, and their own ways of resisting the oppressive system, often through small acts of defiance or by creating powerful, hidden social networks. The debate continues on whether the Ōoku was a place of opportunity for a poor girl to secure a stable life, or simply a well-organized system of indentured servitude. For you, it is simply reality. You learn to find small moments of joy, a shared joke with a friend, a compliment from a supervisor on a well-polished floor, a stolen moment of rest in a hidden corner of a garden. You learn to live for these tiny victories. You look at the distant, shimmering world of the shogun's court, and it feels less like a goal and more like a dream. Your focus is on survival, on getting through today, and then tomorrow, one exhausting, anonymous day at a time. As you toil away in the service quarters, you start to piece together the power structure of the Ōoku from overheard whispers and the deferential panic that ripples through the staff. At the absolute pinnacle of this female-dominated pyramid are two women, often locked in a subtle, lifelong rivalry. They are the shogun's official wife, the mid-Edo Koro, and his mother, the Omid-Edo Koro. The mid-Edo Koro is, in theory, the highest-ranking woman in the Ōoku. She is almost always from an incredibly powerful noble family, often from the imperial court in Kyoto. Her marriage to the shogun is a political alliance, a public statement designed to cement the shogun's legitimacy and tie the military government in Edo to the ancient, revered imperial line. You see her only on rare, formal occasions. She moves like a goddess, surrounded by a legion of attendants. Her kimono are masterpieces of textile art, so heavy with embroidery and gold thread that she can barely walk. Her face is a perfect, emotionless mask of white Oshiro eye powder, with plucked and repainted eyebrows high on her forehead and blackened teeth, a sign of supreme beauty and aristocratic status. She is the sun around which the Ōoku is supposed to orbit. Her quarters are the most lavish, her staff the largest, her every need catered to with painstaking formality. However, her power is often more symbolic than real. She is a revered figurehead, a living symbol of the shogun's power, but she is also an outsider, hailing from the rarefied, ancient court culture of Kyoto. She often finds the rougher, more pragmatic warrior culture of the Edo shogunate alien and intimidating. Her primary duty is to be a paragon of aristocratic grace and, ideally, to provide the shogun with an heir. But this is where the second sun in the sky appears. The shogun's mother. If the shogun was born to a concubine, as often the case, his mother's status skyrockets the moment he assumes power. She may have started as a woman of humble origins, but now she holds immense influence. She is the matriarch, the mother of the ruler of Japan. She commands a deep, personal loyalty from her son that the politically appointed mid-Edo Koro can rarely match. You hear the older servants talk about the constant, subtle tension between the two factions. The mid-Edo Koro escort the shogun's mother's court. They maintain separate households within the Ōoku, each with its own ladies in waiting, its own servants, and its own political agenda. They compete for influence, for the shogun's attention, and for the control of the Ōoku's internal affairs. A quiet but fascinating manifestation of this rivalry was in the realm of fashion and culture. The mid-Edo Koro and her entourage would champion the elegant, refined styles of the Kyoto court, while the shogun's mother and her supporters might favor the bolder, more contemporary fashions of Edo. The choice of a kimono pattern or the style of a poem could be a subtle political statement. Historians continue to debate which of these two figures truly held more power. The answer likely varied depending on the personalities involved in the specific era. A strong, politically savvy mid-Edo Koro could certainly wield significant influence, especially if she had powerful family connections. But more often than not, it was the shogun's mother, backed by the fierce loyalty of the women who had served hers in her days as a mere concubine, who held the real behind-the-scenes power. She understood the ruthless politics of the Ōoku because she had survived them herself. As a lowly genin, you are far removed from their celestial struggles, but their power affects your life in indirect ways. You might be assigned to the kitchens of one faction or the other. You learn which corridors belong to which court and that it is best not to be seen lingering in the wrong territory. You see the ladies in waiting from the rival courts pass each other in the hallways, offering flawless, icy bows that barely conceal their mutual disdain. The great rivalry between the shogun's wife and his mother creates a fundamental instability at the heart of the Ōoku. It is a fault line that runs through the entire society, forcing everyone, from the highest-ranking attendant to the most junior maid, to implicitly choose a side. You, for now, choose the only side that makes sense, the side of anonymity. You keep your head down and scrub the floors, praying that the wars of these goddesses never spill down into your world. Your life settles into a rhythm, a monotonous cycle dictated not by the sun or the seasons, but by the rigid, unyielding schedule of the Ōoku. Every day is a near-perfect replica of the one before it. This predictability is another form of control, a way to tame the spirits of thousands of women by leaving no room for spontaneity or individual desire. The day begins in the cold, freed-on darkness. You are awoken by the sound of a wooden clapper, a sharp, authoritative sound that cuts through the stillness. There is no lingering in that. You and the other girls in your communal room rise immediately, fold your bedding with precise, practiced movements, and store it in a designated cupboard. The first hour is a silent rush of personal grooming. You wash your face with cold water, bind your hair, and put on your simple work kimono. Every action is swift and efficient. Your first duty, as a genin, is to clean. You join the legion of servants who descend upon the corridors and halls, dusting, wiping, and polishing before the higher-ranking women have even stirred. Then it is off to the kitchens to help prepare the morning meal, a massive logistical operation. While you are toiling, the rest of the Ōoku begins to stir. The ladies in waiting rise and begin their own elaborate rituals of dressing and makeup, a process that can take hours. Breakfast is served with the same strict ceremony as any other activity. For you, it is a simple meal of rice, miso soup, and pickles, eaten quickly in the noisy, steamy environment of the service kitchen. For the high-ranking ladies, it is a multi-course affair served on exquisite lacquer trays in the quiet of their private apartments. After the morning meal, The work of the Ōoku begins. For you, this means more chores, laundry, mending, tending to the fires, running errands through the maze-like corridors. For the ladies of rank, their work is of a different nature. They might spend their mornings practicing calligraphy, composing poetry, or mastering the tea ceremony. These were not mere hobbies. They were essential skills for a woman of culture, and proficiency in them was a mark of status. A significant part of their day was also dedicated to simply maintaining their appearance and wardrobe. A high-ranking woman might change her kimono several times a day, depending on the occasion and the time of day, a process that required a team of attendants. One of the more peculiar and time-consuming daily rituals was the formal morning greeting. Each day, the women were required to present themselves to their superiors to offer good wishes. This meant a long, tedious procession where hundreds of women would file past the apartments of the highest-ranking figures, like the shogun's mother and wife, performing the correct bow and uttering the correct formulaic greeting. Historians are still debating the exact function of this ritual. Was it purely a reinforcement of the hierarchy, a daily loyalty pledge, or did it also serve as a kind of daily census, a way for the leaders to visually inspect their subordinates and ensure everything was in order? For the women involved, it was simply a mandatory, and often boring, part of the daily grind. The afternoon brings more of the same, more chores for you, more refined pastimes for the elite. The Ōoku is at its quietest in the afternoon, a low hum of purposeful activity. There might be lessons in music, with the faint sound of a koto, a type of zither drifting from a distant room, or a game of Go being played in a sunlit corner. As evening approaches, the energy shifts. This is the time the shogun might choose to visit. The preparations for the evening meal begin. The most elaborate of the day. The lamps are lit, casting long, dancing shadows down the corridors. After the meal, the Ōoku transforms into a place of quiet leisure. Women might gather to play card games, tell stories, or practice incense guessing games, where they would compete to identify different rare scents for you and the other servants. Evening means the final round of cleaning and preparing the sleeping quarters. By the time you are allowed to retire to your own futon, you are bone tired. You lie in the darkness, listening to the soft breathing of the other girls. The day has been a carbon copy of yesterday, and tomorrow will be no different. This relentless routine is the true nature of the gilded cage. It is not the physical walls that confine you most, but the invisible walls of the schedule. A structure so rigid and all-encompassing that it smothers any hope of a different life. You fall asleep not with dreams of the future, but with the certainty of another identical sunrise. You become accustomed to the grinding routine, but you never become accustomed to the casual, breathtaking luxury that surrounds you. It is a constant, nagging presence that highlights the chasm between your life and the lives of the women you serve. This place isn't just a prison. It is a gilded cage, and the gold is meant to dazzle and distract from the bars. Every object you handle in the main quarters is a work of art. The bowls you wash are not simple ceramic. They are delicate porcelain, hand-painted with intricate scenes of nature. The lacquerware boxes you dust are inlaid with mother-of-pearl and gold, so smooth and glossy, they feel like liquid silk under your fingertips. You are forbidden to look directly at the high-ranking ladies, but you cannot help but steal glances at their clothing. Their kimono are like canvases, woven from the finest silk and dyed in colors so vibrant they seem to shimmer. Each one is a unique creation, sometimes taking months, or even years, to produce. The architecture itself is a statement of wealth and power. You scrub floors made from single, massive planks of cypress wood, polished to a mirror shine. You slide open fusuma doors painted by the most famous artists of the day, depicting serene mountain landscapes, blooming cherry trees, or scenes from classic literature like the Tale of Genji. These images of freedom and nature are a beautiful, cruel irony in a place where no one is free and the only nature is the meticulously manicured, walled-in gardens. These gardens are the only real glimpse of the outdoors the women have. They are masterpieces of landscape design, with carefully placed rocks, tranquil ponds filled with colorful koi carp, and perfectly sculpted trees, but they are also part of the illusion. They are enclosed, controlled nature, a beautiful diorama of a world you can see but never touch. There are no grand vistas, no views of the city or the sky beyond the castle walls. The extravagance extends to the most mundane aspects of life. The water for the baths is heated with expensive charcoal. The air is perpetually scented with rare and costly incense, burned in exquisite ceramic burners. The food served to the upper ranks is a daily feast, featuring the best seasonal ingredients, all prepared with an artistic flair that makes each dish a visual masterpiece. A fascinating and almost absurd example of this opulence was the annual mushi bashai, or airing of the clothes. Once a year, on a clear, dry day, the vast wardrobes of the high-ranking women would be taken out into the courtyards to be aired out, preventing mold and insect damage. For days, the gardens and courtyards would be draped with thousands of silk kimono, creating a dazzling, colorful spectacle. It was a display of wealth, so immense it was almost vulgar. A public reinforcement of the Ōoku status in the shogun's tower. For the lower-ranking servants like you, it meant days of back-breaking work, carefully carrying and hanging these priceless garments. To accidentally tear or stain one would be an unforgivable crime. This constant exposure to luxury has a strange psychological effect. At first, it is intimidating. You are terrified of breaking something, of being the clumsy OAF who shatters a centuries-old tea bowl. But over time, a different feeling creeps in, a deep, simmering resentment. You see the waste, the excess, the sheer, thoughtless consumption. You see a lady-in-waiting complain that her soup is a degree too cold, while you would be grateful for an extra scoop of rice. You see a priceless kimono worn once and then stored away forever, while your own simple garment is patched and dray-patched until it is threadbare. The luxury is not for comfort, it is for status. Each object, from a hairpin to a tea whisk, is a marker of rank. The quality of a woman's possessions directly reflects her position in the hierarchy. This turns the entire Ōoku into a vast theater of conspicuous consumption, where women vie with each other through the beauty of their belongings. Historians still debate the economic impact of the Ōoku. It was a massive drain on the shogunate's finances, a black hole of expenditure. However, it was also a major driver of the craft economy, supporting thousands of artisans, weavers, potters, lacquerware makers, and artists who produced these luxury goods. Was it a frivolous waste of state resources, or a crucial engine of cultural and economic production? The consensus is that it was probably both. For you, these academic questions are meaningless. What you know is this: the beauty of the Ōoku is a lie. It is a carefully constructed fantasy, designed to make the women forget they are captives. But as you polish another golden screen or wash another impossibly delicate bowl, the truth becomes clearer every day. The more beautiful the cage, the more you are aware of the bars. The opulence does not soothe you, it suffocates you. As you become more familiar with the rhythms and routines of the Ōoku, you begin to see beyond the official hierarchies. Yes, the shogun's mother and his official wife are the formal heads, but they are often distant, ceremonial figures. The real, day-to-day power, the gears that turn this vast and complex machine, rests in the hands of a group of women whose title you soon learn to fear and respect. The Otoshi Yori, or the senior elders. The Otoshi Yori are the true managers of the Ōoku. They are a council of high-ranking, experienced ladies in waiting, often women who have been in the Ōoku for decades. They may have once been concubines themselves, or they may have risen through the ranks through sheer political skill and intelligence. They are the ones who oversee the budget, manage the staff of thousands, enforce the rules, and act as the primary gatekeepers to the shogun himself. Nothing happens in the Ōoku without their knowledge and approval. Their influence is immense. They decide which women are presented to the shogun. They control the assignments and promotions of all the servants and ladies in waiting. They can make a woman's life a paradise of comfort and privilege. or they can relegate her to a miserable existence of thankless chores and social isolation. Their favor is the most valuable currency in the Ōoku. You see them occasionally, striding down the main corridors with an air of absolute authority. They are not as flamboyantly dressed as the mid-Edo Kora, but their kimonos are of the finest, most tasteful silk. They don't need to be flashy. Their power is conveyed in their posture, the sharpness of their gaze, and the way even the highest-ranking ladies fall silent and bow deeply as they pass. They are the politicians, the CEOs, and the secret police of this female-run state, all rolled into one. The head of the Otoshi-yori was a position of almost unimaginable power, a role that made its holder arguably one of the most influential figures in the entire shogunate. She had the shogun's ear, controlling the flow of information between the Ōoku and the outside world of male politics. She could influence policy, recommend appointments, and sabotage political rivals by planting rumors or denying access. She was the spider at the center of a vast web of intelligence and influence. One of the most fascinating undebated aspects of their power was their role in the shogun's personal life. When the shogun decided he wanted to spend the night in the Ōoku, he did not just wander in. The process was highly ritualized. He would send a formal request, and it was the Otoshi-yori who would receive it. They would then select a suitable companion for the night from the pool of concubines, or so Kushitsu. While the shogun could certainly request a specific woman, the Otoshi-yori had a great deal of say in the matter. They could promote their favorites, women from their own factions, ensuring that their allies had a chance to bear a potential heir. This gave them a direct hand in shaping the future of the shogunate itself. A particularly curious detail of their administrative power was the use of secret messengers. The Otoshi-yori employed a group of trusted, intelligent younger women known as the Otsukai Band. Their official job was to run messages. Their unofficial job was to be the eyes and ears of the leadership. They moved through every part of the Ōoku, listening, observing, and reporting back on everything from brewing rivalries to simple gossip. They were the intelligence network that made the Otoshi or his control possible. You learn to recognize these women, both the powerful elders and their young messengers. You learn to make yourself extra invisible when they are near. Theirs is a world of high-stakes politics that you want no part of, but you also feel a strange, grudging admiration. These women, trapped in the same cage as you, have not just survived, they have conquered it. They have turned the limitations of their world into a source of immense power. The historical view of the Otoshi-yori is complex and oft uncontradictory. In popular fiction and sensationalist accounts, they are often portrayed as villainous, power-hungry schemers, manipulating the shogun and terrorizing their rivals. While there were undoubtedly ruthless and corrupt individuals among them, many historians now argue for a more nuanced view. These were highly competent administrators, managing a massive and complex household with incredible efficiency. They were skilled politicians navigating a treacherous world. Whether they were selfless public servants or Machiavellian power brokers is a question that scholars still argue over. In the end, they were likely a bit of both, products of the unique and unforgiving environment that created them. For you, scrubbing the floors and trying to stay out of trouble, they are simply the force of nature, the true, unseen rulers of your world. The air in the Ōoku is thick with more than just incense. It is thick with words, whispers, rumors, and carefully curated gossip are the lifeblood of this isolated community. With no newspapers, no letters from home, and no contact with the outside world, information becomes a precious and dangerous commodity. You quickly learn that survival depends not just on mastering the formal rules, but on navigating the treacherous currents of informal communication. Your friendships with the other gen are your first school in this art. As you work together, you talk, you share information. Which supervisor is in a bad mood today? Who received a rare gift of sweets from a visiting relative, a privilege allowed only on rare, highly controlled occasions? Who is rumored to be in favor with one of the Otoshi-yori? This low-level chatter seems harmless, but it is essential for navigating your daily life and avoiding trouble. But as you observe the women of higher rank, you realize they are playing a much more sophisticated game. A conversation between two ladies in waiting, seemingly about the beauty of a new batch of silk, might actually be a coded exchange about the shifting allegiances between the court of the shogun's mother and that of his wife. A seemingly innocent poem composed at a gathering might contain a subtle barb aimed at a rival. Nothing is ever what it seems. Alliances are the key to survival and advancement. No woman, no matter how clever or beautiful, can succeed in the Ōoku alone. You need allies to support you, to defend you from rumors, and to promote your interests. These alliances are constantly shifting. Fragile things built on a complex calculus of shared interests. Regional loyalties, women from the same domain often stuck together. And personal chemistry. A friendship can be a shield, but a broken alliance can leave you dangerously exposed. The primary weapons in this silent war are rumors. A carefully planted story can destroy a woman's reputation overnight. Is a certain concubine secretly in love with a kabuki actor she saw once as a child? The rumor is absurd. She has left the castle in a decade, but the hint of impropriety is enough to stain her name. Does a lady in waiting have a disfiguring mole hidden beneath her kimono? The story spreads like wildfire, making her an object of ridicule. These attacks are vicious, psychological, and almost impossible to defend against. One of the strangest and most specific forms of this information warfare was the scandal of the gift. Gift-giving was a huge part of the Ōoku's social fabric, a way to curry favor and display status. However, it was also a minefield. Accepting a gift from the wrong person could be seen as a political statement. Worse, rivals could send anonymous, poison gifts. This was not necessarily literal poison. A more subtle tactic was to send a gift that violated some obscure rule of etiquette. For instance, a depiction of a plant that was considered unlucky. The recipient would then be in an impossible position. Rejecting the gift would be an insult, but accepting it would be a mark of her own ignorance and bad taste. Historians still marvel at the sheer creativity of these non-violent acts of aggression. You learn to be incredibly careful about what you say, and to whom. You learn to listen more than you speak. You become an expert in reading the subtle cues, the flicker of an eye, the tightening of a fan, the pregnant pause in a conversation. You learn that silence can be as powerful as a word. When a high-ranking woman is accused of some misstep, her allies will rush to her defense, while her rivals will fall conspicuously silent. Their lack of support a damning verdict in itself. The Ōoku was, in essence, a massive echo chamber, with no external reality check. Even the most outlandish stories could take on the weight of truth. This created an atmosphere of intense paranoia. Women became suspicious of their closest friends, constantly wondering who was a true ally and who was a spy for a rival faction. The psychological toll of this constant vigilance must have been immense. The academic world continues to explore the social dynamics of the Ōoku, often using models from sociology and anthropology to understand how such a large, isolated, all-female group organized itself. Was this constant intrigue a natural result of confinement and boredom, a pressure cooker effect, or was it a rational, if ruthless, political system that emerged in the absence of more conventional forms of power, like wealth or military might? The prevailing theory is that it was a unique blend of both. The women of the Ōoku, denied agency in the outside world, poured all of their intelligence, ambition, and frustration into the only arena they could control, the social hierarchy of their own gilded cage. You, a small fish in this vast, turbulent pond, quickly realize that the most dangerous currents are the ones you cannot see. You stick close to your few trusted friends, keep your mouth shut, and hope the tide of rumor never turns against you. The most fundamental, inescapable reality of your new life is the silence where half of humanity should be. The world of the Ōoku. You is a world almost entirely devoid of men. Aside from the shogun himself, no adult male is permitted to cross the threshold into the inner sanctum. This single, absolute rule shapes every aspect of society, creating a social experiment unlike any other in history. The few exceptions to this rule are so rare and so highly controlled that they only serve to emphasize the isolation. Very young boys, the sons of the shogun or high-ranking ladies, could live in the Ōoku until they reached a certain age, usually around 7 to 10. After a coming-of-age ceremony, they were moved to the men's quarters of the castle. Their departure often is a source of great heartbreak for their mothers. Occasionally, elderly male doctors might be granted access in cases of serious illness, but they were always escorted by a large retinue of female attendants and were forbidden from speaking directly to their high-ranking patients, communicating instead through intermediaries. Male artisans or workers needed for repairs were also sometimes allowed in, but their visits were treated like a military operation, with the area cordoned, often the workers constantly supervised. For you, this means that the male face becomes a distant memory, the gruff voice of your father, the laughter of your brothers, the sight of farmers in the fields, all of it fades into the realm of a past life. Your world is now composed entirely of female faces, female voices, female authority, the authority figures who command you, the colleagues you work alongside, the rivals you fear, the friends you cherish, all are women. This creates a unique social dynamic. In the outside world, a woman's status was largely defined by her relationship to men, her father, her husband, her son. Here, a woman's status is defined by her relationship to other women and to the one man who is more of a concept than a person. The shogun, power, ambition, and conflict, which in the outside world are oft unchanneled through male-dominated structures, are here played out in a purely female arena. One of the most curious and debated consequences of this single-sex environment was the nature of relationships within the Ōoku, with no possibility of romantic involvement with men. It is widely believed that intense, passionate, and sometimes romantic relationships between women were common. These relationships, sometimes referred to as kimei, or a contractual sisterhood, could be deeply emotional and fiercely loyal. A senior lady might take a junior attendant under her wing, acting as her mentor, protector, and intimate companion. These bonds could be a source of immense comfort and stability in a treacherous world. Of course, historical records, written largely by men from a Confucian perspective, are mostly silent or censorious on this topic. The extent and nature of these relationships remain a subject of intense academic speculation. Were they simply a form of platonic mentorship, a substitute for the family life the women had lost, or were they fully realized romantic and physical relationships, a natural adaptation to their circumstances? While concrete proof is scarce, memoirs and fictional works from the period hint at a complex world of female love and partnership that was an open secret within the Ōoku's walls. This topic remains one of the most sensitive and difficult to research aspects of Ōoku life. The absence of men also had a profound effect on the culture and aesthetics of the Ōoku. It became a hyper-feminine world. The emphasis on beauty, grace, and refined arts like poetry and music was partly a reflection of aristocratic culture, but it was also amplified by the enclosed environment. It was a world that valued subtlety over brute force, intuition over direct logic, and social grace over overt aggression. Even the ghosts and superstitions were unique. The fascinating, little-known aspect of Ōoku folklore was the belief in spirits that were specifically born from female emotions. There were stories of the ghosts of jealous concubines who haunted the corridors, or of the spirits of women who died of heartbreak, their weeping heard on rainy nights. These stories reflect the specific anxieties and pressures of their world. You adapt to this new reality. You stop expecting to see a man's face around the corner. The world of men, the world of samurai politics, of battles, of commerce becomes an abstraction, a distant place you hear about only in filtered rumors. Your reality is the rustle of silk, the scent of incense, the low murmur of female voices, the silent, watchful eyes of your fellow prisoners. You are living in a society that has been completely reshaped by the absence of one half of the human race. It is not necessarily better or worse. It is simply different. a world with its own rules, its own passions, and its own unique form of humanity. One afternoon, as you are meticulously weeding a small, insignificant corner of an inner courtyard, a strange energy begins to ripple through the Ōoku. It starts as a subtle shift, a quickening in the steps of the passing attendants, a new tension in the air. Then you hear at the distant, rhythmic clang of a special bell. It is the sound you have been taught to recognize and fear. The shogun is coming. The entire Ōoku explodes into a state of controlled, silent panic. It is as if an electric current has shot through the complex. Supervisors appear as if from nowhere, their faces grim, their voices sharp but low as they hiss orders. Every activity that is not directly related to the shogun's visit ceases immediately. Cleaning crews redouble their efforts, polishing already gleaming floors. Kitchens, which were already in high gear preparing the evening meal, become a blur of frantic but precise activity. You and the other low-ranking servants are ordered to make yourselves scarce. You are to finish your task and then disappear into the service corridors. The shogun must not be burdened with the sight of common laborers. As you scurry away, you see ladies in waiting rushing to their quarters. Their faces a mixture of excitement and anxiety. They need to change into their most beautiful kimono, to perfect their makeup, to prepare themselves to be seen. The shogun's visit is not a casual affair. It is a highly choreographed state occasion, even when it is for the purpose of relaxation. He does not simply walk in. He is a celestial body, and his path must be cleared and purified. His route from his own quarters in the castle to the Ōoku is lined with guards. As he crosses the threshold, a profound silence falls over the entire complex. All doors to side corridors are shut. No one is allowed to move or speak. From your hiding place, peeking through a crack in a screen, you catch your first glimpse of him. It is underwhelming, then terrifying all at once. He is just a man, dressed in a formal but relatively simple silk kimono, but he walks in a bubble of absolute power. He is flanked by his most senior male advisors, who are only permitted to go so far, and his personal attendant, a young boy. The true entourage is female. A select group of the highest-ranking Otoshi Yori meets him at the entrance, bowing so low their foreheads touch the floor. They then escort him, walking backwards with flawless grace, deeper into the Ōoku. His destination is typically the apartments of his mother or his official wife, the Midedo Kora. There, he will engage in polite, formal conversation, take tea, and perhaps watch a specially prepared dance or musical performance. Everything is designed to please him, to soothe him after a long day of governing the country. But beneath the surface of serene entertainment, a fierce competition is raging. Every woman who comes into his presence is trying to make a favorable impression. They smile, a well-turned phrase, a graceful movement. Any of these could catch his eye and change her destiny forever. A particularly strange and little-known custom associated with his visit was the tasting ceremony. Every single dish and cup of sake presented to the shogun had to be tasted first. Not just once, but multiple times. A designated food taster, a low-ranking girl chosen for the unfortunate role, would take the first bite. If she didn't collapse, the head of the kitchen would taste it. Then, the high-ranking lady in waiting serving the meal would taste it. All in the shogun's presence. This elaborate ritual was a stark reminder of the constant fear of assassination by poison, a very real threat for the ruler of Japan. The atmosphere in the Ōoku remains tense for the entire duration of his visit. Everyone is on their best behavior. A single misstep, a dropped tray, a loud noise, a servant accidentally showing her face could bring disastrous consequences for the individual and her superiors. Historians still debate the true nature of the shogun's relationship with the Ōoku. Was it a sanctuary, a place of genuine relaxation and family life away from the pressures of state? Or was it just another symbol of his power, a living collection of beautiful objects, a human treasure chest? The truth is likely somewhere in between, unvaried greatly from one shogun to the next. Some were known to genuinely care for their families within the Ōoku, while others treated it as little more than a necessary political and biological institution. When the bell rings again, signaling his departure, a collective, unspoken sigh of relief sweeps through the complex. The tension breaks. The normal rhythms of life slowly resume. For you, the event was a fleeting, terrifying glimpse into the center of power. You saw the man for whom this entire city of women exists. He is the sun, and everyone here is a planet, trapped in his orbit. The brief excitement fades, replaced by the familiar reality of your life. The floors still need to be scrubbed. The laundry still needs to be folded. But now, the monotony is colored by a new understanding. You have seen the reason for your imprisonment, and it has the face of a single, ordinary-looking man who holds the entire world in his hands. Weeks, maybe months, pass. The memory of the shogun's visit has faded into the background hum of daily life. Then, one evening, a different kind of tremor runs through the Ōoku. It is not the frantic, public alarm of a daytime visit. This is a quiet, secret, and far more significant event. A single woman has been chosen to receive the shogun's favor tonight. She has been summoned to his bedchamber. The selection process is one of the most mysterious and politically charged rituals in the Ōoku. Officially, the choice is the shogun's alone. He might have noticed a woman during a formal event, or he might simply ask for someone new. In reality, the Otoshiyori wield enormous influence. They maintain a list of all the eligible women, the Ochuro, or mid-ranked attendants, who have been deemed beautiful, healthy, and well-educated enough to be considered. They subtly promote their own candidates, women from their own factions or families, whispering their names and praises to the shogun. Tonight, the chosen one is a girl named Hain. You don't know her well, but you have seen her. She is a quiet girl, known for her skill in calligraphy and her gentle demeanor. She comes from a minor samurai family, not a powerful clan. Her selection sends a shockwave through the intricate web of Ōoku politics. The factions who had been pushing their own, more powerful candidates are furious, though their anger is masked by perfect smiles and polite congratulations. Hain's own patrons are, of course, ecstatic. Their gamble has paid off. For Hain, the selection is both the culmination of a lifelong dream and the beginning of a terrifying ordeal. It is not a romantic invitation. It is a political summons. From the moment she is chosen, she is no longer an individual. She is a vessel for the hopes and ambitions of her family and her patrons. The preparations begin immediately. She is whisked away by a team of senior ladies in waiting. Her own simple room is a thing of the past. She is taken to a special suite of rooms, the Ōoku, reserved for women about to be presented to the shogun. Here, she undergoes an intense beautification ritual. She is given a long, luxurious bath in water scented with aromatic herbs. Her body is scrubbed and perfumed. Her face is meticulously made up, a fresh canvas of white powder. Her hair, her greatest pride, is undone, washed, perfumed, and then intricately styled. She is dressed in a series of magnificent kimonos, layer upon layer of the finest silk, all brand new and made specifically for this occasion. The colors and patterns are carefully chosen to enhance her beauty and to carry auspicious meanings. The weight of the garments is immense, a physical burden that mirrors the psychological weight of the moment. A fascinating and little known part of this process was the security check. Even a woman who had lived in the Ōoku for years was subjected to an incredibly thorough physical search before being sent to the shogun. Attendants would check her hair, her clothes, and her body for any concealed items, particularly sharp objects like a hairpin that could potentially be used as a weapon. The paranoia surrounding the shogun's safety was absolute. As Hain is prepared, the news of her selection spreads. For most of the women in the Ōoku, she is now an object of intense envy. To be chosen, even for a single night, is the ultimate validation. It is the one and only path to real power and status. It means better quarters, better food, beautiful clothes, and the respect of her peers. If she is truly fortunate, she might become a favored concubine, and if she bears a son, she could one day become the most powerful woman in Japan. But for a smaller, more dangerous group the other potential concubines and their ambitious backers. She has just become the enemy. She is a rival who has just pulled ahead in the race. Her success is their failure. And so, even as she is being adorned like a goddess, the whispers against her have already begun. The silent war of the Ōoku has just claimed a new battlefield, and she is standing in the center of it. Historians continue to debate how much agency these women had. Were they willing participants in a high-stakes game, using their beauty and intelligence to advance their family's fortunes? Or were they little more than pawns, beautifully dressed sacrifices on the altar of clan politics? The truth is likely that they were both, caught in a system that offered incredible rewards but demanded the surrender of their personal freedom. For Hain, as she takes one last look at her reflection, a stranger's face, a perfect, painted doll, she knows only one thing for sure. Her life, for better or for worse, will never be the same again. The journey from the preparation suite to the Shogun's private chambers is a short but nerve-wracking procession. Hain walks down a special, designated corridor, her every steps low and deliberate, hampered by the restrictive layers of silk. She is escorted by a senior Otoshi-yori and a few high-ranking attendants. The hallway is silent, the paper lanterns casting a soft, flickering glow. The air is heavy with the scent of expensive incense and unspoken expectations. The Shogun's bedchamber, or Ōoku, is not the opulent, romantic setting one might imagine. It is a surprisingly austere room, designed with security and formality in mind above all else. The decorations are tasteful but minimal. The room is structured with multiple layers of sliding screens, creating a series of antechambers. The real purpose of this design is not aesthetics, but to allow for guards and attendants to be stationed nearby, just out of sight, yet always present. When Hain arrives, the Shogun is already there. She performs the deep, floor-touching bow, the dujeza, holding the position until he bids her to rise. The evening begins not with passion, but with ceremony. They share a highly ritualized cup of sake, a symbolic act of purification and union. The conversation is formal and stilted. The Shogun might ask about her family, her home province, or her skill in poetry. She must answer in the formal, deferential language of the court. Her reply is clever but not too clever, humble but not servile. It is a test, an interview. What happens next is one of the most debated and mythologized aspects of Ōoku life. Popular culture and sensationalist novels often depict a night of unbridled passion. The reality, according to more sober historical analysis, was likely far different. The act itself was freighted with immense political and dynastic importance. The primary purpose was not pleasure, but procreation. The goal was to produce a male heir for the shogunate. This turned the bedchamber into a strangely public, or at least semi-public, space. Several female attendants would remain in the room, or just on the other side of a paper screen, throughout the entire encounter. Their official purpose was to be on hand to serve refreshments or assist if needed. Their real purpose was to act as witnesses. One of the most bizarre and often cited details is the role of the Otoko no Haiyaku, or the male role woman. Though the existence and function of such a role is highly contested among serious historians. Some accounts suggest an older woman would be present to instruct an inexperienced concubine, a claim that many scholars dismiss as salacious fiction. What is more certain is that attendants were present to verify that the union did, in fact, take place. This was crucial. A woman could not be allowed to falsely claim she was pregnant with the shogun's child. The presence of these witnesses transformed what should be an intimate act into a formal, observed performance. For a young woman like Hain, who may have had little to no experience with men, the pressure must have been unbearable. She had to perform her role flawlessly, to be pleasing to the shogun, all while being acutely aware of the silent observers just a few feet away. There was no guarantee of a second night. For many women, this was their one and only chance. Their entire future, and the future of their family, hinged on this single, strange, and ceremonial encounter. They had to make an impression that would last, to be memorable enough for the shogun to ask for them again. after the shogun has fallen asleep. Hain is not permitted to linger. She must quietly dress and be escorted back to her new, upgraded quarters. The night is over. There is no pillow talk, no morning after cuddles. The entire affair is transcational, a piece of state business wrapped in silken ceremony. Scholars are still trying to understand the psychological impact of this system on the participants. For the shogun, did the constant pressure to produce an heir and the lack of privacy strip the act of any personal meaning? For the women, how did they reconcile the immense honor of being chosen with the dehumanizing reality of the experience? The historical records, focused as they are on politics and lineage, offer few clues into the emotional lives of these individuals. We are left to speculate on the mixture of fear, ambition, pride, and perhaps profound loneliness that must have filled that silent, lamplit room. As Hain walks back through the quiet corridors, the cool night air on her face, she is no longer just a girl. She is a Sokushitsu, a concubine, a title she has won at a price she is only just beginning to understand. The next morning, the sun rises on a completely new reality for Hain. When she wakes, she is not in her old, crowded room with the other genin. She is in a spacious, private apartment, attended by her own small staff of lower-ranking servants girls who, just yesterday, were her peers. The news of her night with the shogun has spread through the Ōoku. You like a spark in a dry field. Her status has been instantly and spectacularly elevated. When she walks down the corridor, the change is palpable. The women who used to ignore her now stop and bow, their eyes lowered respectfully. She is no longer required to walk along the edges of the hallway. She can now walk in the center, the privileged path of the elite. Her simple work clothes have been replaced by a wardrobe of beautiful silk kimono. Her food is no longer the basic fare of the service kitchens. It is the same delicate, multi-course cuisine served to the highest-ranking ladies. She has officially been granted the title of Sokushitsu, or concubine. This makes her part of the shogun's extended family, while she is still leagues below the official wife. The mid-Edo Koro, she has leapt over the heads of hundreds of other women. She has gone from being an anonymous servant to a person of consequence. This sudden rise is intoxicating, but also deeply unsettling. Her old friends from the service quarters now treat her with a formal deference that creates a painful distance between them. They are no longer her confidants. They are her subordinates. She is an outsider in her old world and a novice in her new one. She must now learn a whole new set of rules. The etiquette of the upper echelons, which is even more complex and unforgiving than what she knew before. Her primary purpose is now to wait. She waits to see if the shogun will summon her again. Her entire value, her entire position, is dependent on his continued favor. If he calls for her regularly, her influence will grow. She will be seen as a rising star, a woman worth cultivating as an ally. The Otoshiri and other powerful figures will begin to court her, seeking to bring her into their factions. But this new status also makes her a target. The moment she was chosen, she painted a bullseye on her own back. Every other ambitious woman in the Ōoku, every other concubine who fears being replaced, now sees her as a direct threat. The polite smiles and formal congratulations she receives are thin veils for the intense jealousy and resentment simmering just beneath the surface. A fascinating and bizarre manifestation of this new status was the official announcement of the relationship. While the act itself was witnessed, the concubine's new status was not formally recognized until she missed her next menstrual cycle. This was the first, unconfirmed sign of a potential pregnancy. Upon this sign, her name would be officially entered into a special register, and her allowance and staff would be increased. This practice, tying a woman's official recognition so directly and publicly to her biology, highlights the almost brutal pragmatism of the Ōoku system. Her worth was, in the end, measured by her reproductive potential. Historians debate the level of security and privilege afforded to a newly minted concubine. While she was certainly granted luxuries, was she truly safer? Some argue that her elevated status offered protection, as harming a potential mother of a future shogun was a grave crime. Others contend that this very potential made her more vulnerable. Her rivals now had a powerful motive to eliminate her before she could become pregnant and solidify her position. Hain feels this danger acutely. She feels the eyes on her back, the whispers that stop when she enters a room. The food she eats is now tasted for poison, not just for the shogun, but for her. Her attendants are not just there to serve her, they are there to guard her. She is trapped in a new, more luxurious, but infinitely more dangerous part of the cage. The sun of the second day is warm, but it brings a chill to her heart. Yesterday, she was anonymous and safe. Today, she is important and vulnerable. She has won the lottery, but the prize is to live the rest of her life walking on a tightrope, with the promise of ultimate power on one side and the pit of oblivion on the other. The quiet, gentle girl who loved calligraphy is gone, and in her place is a player in a deadly game she is only just beginning to learn. In the days and weeks that follow Hein's elevation, the tranquil surface of the Ōoku begins to bubble with unseen heat. The shogun, pleased with her gentle nature and perhaps intrigued by her lack of powerful political backing, continues to summon her. With each visit, her stir rises, and the invisible currents of jealousy and ambition begin to flow more swiftly, pulling the entire community into a state of quiet turmoil. The first and most obvious source of this tension is the other concubines. There are women who have been in the Ōoku for years. Women from powerful families who have been groomed for this role since birth, who now find themselves passed over for a relative unknown. Their frustration is immense. They have played the game by the rules, forged the right alliances, and yet they are being ignored. Their polite morning greetings to Hein become clipped. Their smiles tighten brittle. Their attendants and supporters take their cues from them. A servant loyal to a rival concubine might accidentally spill tea near Hein's new quarters. A lady-in-waiting from an opposing faction might make a seemingly innocent remark about Hein's provincial accent, a subtle but sharp jab at her humble origins. These are small acts of aggression, pinpricks designed to unnerve and isolate her. The rivalry is not just personal, it is political. Every concubine represents a faction. The powerful clans who sent their daughters to the Ōoku are expecting a return on their investment. They want their girl to be the one to bear the next heir, securing their family's influence for another generation. Hein's success is a direct threat to their political ambitions. The great lords in the world of men, in Edo Castle, may be debating policy on military strategy, but their wives, daughters, and sisters in the Ōoku, you are fighting a parallel war, a war of whispers and alliances, for the same ultimate prize. Even the two great powers of the Ōoku, the shogun's mother and his official wife, the mid-Edo Koro, are drawn into the fray. Each of them has their own candidates, their own favorites whom they are trying to promote. Hein, being an independent player, becomes a wild card. Does one of them try to co-opt her, to bring her into their fold? Or do they see her as a threat to their own preferred succession plans and work together to undermine her? Hein finds herself having to navigate the treacherous political landscape between these two titans, knowing that favoring one will earn the eternal enmity of the other. A strange and little-known arena for this conflict was the exchange of poetry. Poetry composition was a daily pastime, but it was also a weapon. A rival might compose a beautiful verse about a wilting flower that bloomed too quickly, a clear and public insult aimed at Hein. Her supporters would then be obligated to compose a clever response, perhaps a poem about a humble wildflower whose strength surpasses the hothouse orchid. These poetic duels were a highly sophisticated and deniable form of psychological warfare. Historians are still trying to map the complex factionalism of the Ōoku. It was not a simple two-sided conflict. It was a multipolar world of constantly shifting alliances. There were factions based on family ties, on regional origins, on personal friendships, and on loyalty to the great matriarchs. The rise of a new favorite like Hein would throw this delicate ecosystem into chaos, forcing a realignment of all the existing power blocks. The central question scholars debate is how much this internal Ōoku politics actually influenced the real politics of the shogunate. Some argue it was a self-contained storm in a teacup, with little real-world impact. Others maintain that the Ōoku was a shadow government, and the rivalries within it had profound consequences for the succession and the balance of power among the great samurai clans. For Hain, the academic debate is irrelevant. She is living the reality. She feels the atmosphere changing around her. The once uniform politeness of the Ōoku has fractured, revealing the sharp edges of ambition and envy beneath. She is more isolated than ever. The few friends she had are now too low-ranked to associate with, and the women of her new station are all potential rivals. She is surrounded by people, yet she is utterly alone. The favor of the most powerful man in Japan has brought her wealth, status, and beautiful things, but it has cost her the simple human comfort of trust. The air is thick with unspoken threats, and Hain knows that the silent war has just begun. As Hain navigates her precarious new position, she becomes acutely aware of the single, overwhelming obsession that drives the entire Ōoku. It is the silent, beating heart of the institution, the ultimate goal that justifies all the sacrifice, all the intrigue, and all the cruelty. This is the quest for the heir. The Tofugu shogunate, for all its immense military and political power, had a surprisingly persistent problem producing a healthy, legitimate male heir to continue the dynasty. The official wife, the mid-Edo Koro, often failed to produce children due to a variety of factors including political marriages that were not consummated, health issues, or simple bad luck. This is why the role of the concubine, the Sokushitsu, was not just a matter of the shogun's pleasure. It was a biological and political necessity. The entire purpose of their existence was to be a backup system, an insurance policy for the continuation of the ruling line. This turns the Ōoku into a high-stakes reproductive arena. Every concubine understands that her true value, her only path to lasting power and security, lies in her womb. The shogun's favor is fleeting. Beauty fades, but the mother of a future shogun is untouchable. Her position is secure for life. She will be elevated to a status rivaling that of the mid-Edo Koro herself. Her family will be showered with wealth and honors. She will have achieved the ultimate victory in the Ōoku's great game. Hain now feels this pressure every single day. Every month that passes without a sign of pregnancy is a mark against her. The Otoshi Yori, who manage her affairs, watch her with clinical, expectant eyes. The whispers of her rivals grow louder. Is she barren? Is the shogun losing interest? Her position, which seemed so secure just weeks ago, begins to feel fragile again. The entire culture of the Ōoku is geared towards this one goal. There are special diets, prescribed for the concubines, full of foods believed to increase fertility. There are prayers and offerings, made at the small Shinto shrine located within the Ōoku's walls. Women exchange charms and amulets believed to help with conception. The obsession is total and all-consuming. A particularly fascinating and rather sad aspect of this was the intense medical scrutiny the women were under. The Ōoku had its own staff of female physicians, whose primary job was to monitor the reproductive health of the concubines. Their menstrual cycles were tracked with meticulous, almost obsessive, detail in official records. This was not for the woman's personal health, but for the state. Her body was, in essence, a piece of government property, its functions a matter of national importance. Historians who have studied these records get a unique, sterile glimpse into the biological realities that underpin the political drama. The competition to be the first to conceive is ferocious. When one concubine becomes pregnant, it sets off a panic among the others. They have fallen behind in the race. This is why the period between a woman being chosen and her first confirmed pregnancy is so incredibly dangerous. It is the window of opportunity for her rivals to act. This intense focus on producing an heir raises a difficult question that historians still grapple with. What was the true genetic lineage of the shoguns? The Ōoku was a sealed environment, but was it perfectly sealed? The absolute ban on men was the ideal. But over the 2.5 centuries of the Ōoku's existence, were there lapses? Rumors have always persisted of secret affairs, of doctors or artisans who were smuggled in, or even of romantic entanglements between the women themselves, leading to faked pregnancies. While there is no concrete evidence to support these sensationalist claims, the closed, secretive nature of the Ōoku makes them impossible to completely disprove. The question of whether a shogun's heir was always, without a doubt, his biological son remains one of those tantalizing what-ifs of history. For Hain, the stakes are deeply personal. She wants a child not just for the power and security it would bring, but perhaps also for a deeper, more human reason. In this world of suffocating loneliness, a child would be someone to love, a real human connection in a world of artificent political maneuvering. There would be a piece of her, a legacy that could not be taken away. She begins to pray at the shrine, her offerings joining the dozens left by other hopeful women. She follows the prescribed diets. She endures the humiliating monthly check-ins with the female physicians. She is no longer just Hain. She is a candidate, a vessel, a player in the great dynastic lottery. The ultimate prize is within sight, but the path to it is fraught with danger. And she knows that many have tried and failed, their hopes withering like unwatered flowers in the beautiful, merciless gardens of the Ōoku. Then, one day, it happens. The monthly check-in with the female physician brings the news that Hain and her entire faction have been desperately hoping for. She is pregnant. The moment the news is confirmed, the entire atmosphere around her changes once again. The Ōoku, which had been a battlefield of subtle psychological warfare, now feels like a place of imminent physical danger. The silent war is about to turn hot. The news is not shouted from the rooftops. It is a closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of the highest-ranking women and the shogun himself. But secrets have a way of leaking in the Ōoku. A servant overhears a whispered conversation. A rival physician notices a change in the medical supplies being ordered for Haina's quarters. Soon, everyone knows. Hain is immediately placed under a form of luxurious house arrest. Her quarters become a fortress. Her personal staff is increased, and every one of them is chosen for their unimpeachable loyalty. Her food preparation is moved to a separate, private kitchen, overseen by her most trusted attendants. Every single ingredient is inspected, and every dish is tasted by multiple people before it reaches her lips. The fear of poison is no longer a vague anxiety. It is a clear and present danger. The history of the Ōoku is rife with stories, some certainly true, some likely embellished, of accidents befalling pregnant concubines. A rival might slip something into her food to induce a miscarriage. A loose floorboard might be strategically placed on a staircase she uses frequently. A rumor might be started that she was unfaithful. A story designed to have the pregnancy declared illegitimate and the mother disgraced, even if it means the shogun loses a potential heir. The stakes are so high that even this level of political sabotage is not off the table. This is where the Ōoku's undercurrent of superstition and psychological manipulation becomes a lethal weapon. A rival faction might hire a corrupt priest on the outside to place a curse on Hain. They would then make sure that word of this curse leaks back into the Ōoku. Strange omens would start to appear near her quarters, a dead crow on her doorstep, an unnerving sound at night. These things are harmless in themselves, but they are designed to create an atmosphere of terror, to wear down the pregnant woman's psychological defenses, in the hope that stress and fear will accomplish what poison could not. A particularly insidious and little documented tactic was the manipulation of medicine. A rival could bribe one of the lower-ranking apothecaries who prepared the herbal remedies given to pregnant women. The medicine might be replaced with a harmless but ineffective substitute, or worse, with an herb known to cause complications. Proving such a crime was nearly impossible. Was it a malicious act, or simply a tragic medical error? The ambiguity was the point. Historians face a significant challenge in verifying these stories. The official records of the shogunate would never mention such sordid affairs. Our knowledge comes from more dubious sources. Scandalous pamphlets published anonymously, memoirs written decades later with an axe to grind, and fictionalized accounts that blend fact with drama. Separating the historical reality from the lurid myth-making is a constant struggle for scholars. The consensus is that while the most dramatic stories of murder and overt violence will likely rare, the use of subtle poisons, psychological torment, and deranged accidents was a very real and ever-present threat. Hain lives in the center of this storm. She is pampered and protected like a priceless treasure, but she has never felt more like a prisoner. She is rarely allowed to leave her apartments. Her only companions are her guards, who are also her jailers. She is plagued by anxiety. Is the stomach cramp she feels the result of something she ate? Is the creak of the floorboards outside her room just the building settling? Or is it something more sinister? She sees the faces of her rivals when she is occasionally escorted to the garden for some fresh air. Their eyes are cold, their polite bows masking a chilling hatred. They are praying for her to fail. They are watching, waiting for a single moment of weakness, a single lapse in her security. The silent war of the Ōoku has entered its most brutal phase. The prize is no longer just the shogun's favor, but the life of the unborn child she now carries. The beautiful prison has become a hunting ground, and she is the prey. As Heine's pregnancy progresses, she becomes less of a person and more of a precious, fragile object. The entire apparatus of the Ōoku, or at least her faction of it, mobilizes to protect her and the future heir. Her life transforms into a gilded bubble, a world of obsessive care and suffocating protection. Her daily routine is now dictated entirely by the female physicians. She is instructed on how much to walk, when to rest, and what to eat. Her diet becomes a subject of intense focus, a bizarre mix of traditional medicine and superstition. She is fed specific types of fish, seaweed, and vegetables believed to impart strength and intelligence to the fetus. Anything considered unlucky or unclean is strictly forbidden. The security around her tightens even further. No one is allowed into her quarters without being announced and approved by her chief attendant. Gifts from other women, once a social necessity, are now politely but firmly refused, seen as potential Trojan horses for poison or curses. She is living in almost total isolation, her world shrunk to a few rooms and a handful of trusted faces. A fascinating ritual that begins during this period is the ceremony of the sash. Around the 5th month of pregnancy, on a specially chosen auspicious day, often the day of the dog, an animal associated with easy births, a special maternity sash, the waraobi, is ceremonial wrapped around the concubine's abdomen. This is a grand affair, attended by the highest-ranking women. The sash itself is made of white silk, blessed at the Ōoku's shrine. The ceremony is both a Shinto ritual to pray for a safe delivery in the public political statement. It is the official, undeniable announcement of the pregnancy, a challenge to all rivals. It says, "This is real. This is happening. The heir is coming." From this day forward, Heine's primary role is to be serene. She is encouraged to spend her days in quiet, calming activities. She practices calligraphy, but only writes auspicious characters. She looks at beautiful paintings of nature. She listens to gentle music played on the koto. The belief is that the mother's state of mind directly influences the child in the womb. The calm, cultured mother will produce a calm, intelligent child. Any form of stress, anger, or sadness is to be avoided at all costs. This, of course, is a cruel irony, as she has never been under more stress in her life. The historical accuracy of the intensity of these protective measures is still a subject of some debate. Are the stories of concubines being sealed in their rooms for months on end an exaggeration? Possibly. However, court diaries and administrative records do show a significant increase in security, medical attention, and resource allocation for a pregnant concubine, especially if it was a high-stakes pregnancy with no other clear heir in the picture. The level of protection likely corresponded directly to the level of political threat. One of the more peculiar and lesser-known beliefs was the fear of Mononoke, or vengeful spirits, attacking the unborn child. It was thought that the jealous spirits of rival women, both living and dead, could possess the mother or harm the fetus. To ward off this supernatural threat, special prayers would be recited, and protective amulets, or omamori, would be sewn into the pregnant woman's clothing and placed around her rooms. The line between real-world threats, poison, and supernatural threats, curses, was blurry. Both were treated with the same level of seriousness. Hein feels like a doll, carefully placed in a beautiful box and draped in layers of silk. She is no longer in control of her own life, or even her own body. Her every action is monitored, her every meal scrutinized, her every mood managed. The women who attend her are kind and deferential, but she knows their kindness is directed not at her, Hein, but at the precious cargo she is carrying. She yearns for a simple walk in the garden without an escort, a normal conversation that isn't filled with stilted pleasantries, a meal that she can eat without a flicker of fear. But these simple freedoms are gone. She is the living vessel of the future, a treasure to be guarded. The loneliness is profound. In the quiet of the night, she places a hand on her growing belly. It is the only real thing in her life, a secret, kicking life that is hers and hers alone. It is her hope, her justification, and the source of all her danger. She is a prisoner of her own biology, waiting for the day that will either bring her ultimate triumph or unimaginable tragedy. The day of the birth arrives with a controlled, desperate urgency. A special birthing room, prepared for weeks, is put into use. It is scrubbed clean and purified with Shinto rituals. The paper screens are replaced with pure white ones. The birth is an exclusively female affair. No men, not even male physicians, are allowed. The delivery is managed by a team of the most experienced female physicians and midwives in the Ōoku. It is a long and arduous process. Hein is surrounded by women, some offering encouragement, some chanting prayers, some preparing herbal remedies. The shogun is not present. He waits in a separate chamber, receiving periodic updates. The entire Ōoku holds its breath. The future of the shogunate and the fate of countless political factions hangs in the balance in this small, white room. And then, the cry, the first cry of a newborn. A midwife quickly inspects the baby and announces the result. It is a boy. A wave of jubilation, so powerful it is almost palpable, sweeps through Heina's faction. They have won. The whispers, the prayers, the months of terror and vigilance has all paid off. A messenger is dispatched to inform the shogun, who is no doubt immensely relieved. The news spreads through the castle, and soon, through the entire capital of Edo. A new heir has been born. For Hein, the moment is a blur of exhaustion, pain, and overwhelming relief. She is now no longer just a concubine. She is the Omoya-sama, the mother of a potential future shogun. Her status is instantly solidified. She has ascended to the highest echelons of the Ōoku's power structure. Her life changes overnight, and this time, the change feels permanent. Her personal apartments are expanded. Her staff doubles. She is granted a massive income, wealth beyond her family's wildest dreams. The deference she receives is no longer just polite. It is deeply, genuinely fearful and respectful. She has become one of the most powerful women in the country. The most significant change is her relationship with her child. In a heartbreaking twist, she is often not the primary caregiver. The infant heir is considered state property. He is immediately assigned his own household, his own staff of wet nurses, attendants, and doctors. Hein is allowed to visit him, of course, but his day-to-day upbringing is managed by a team of professionals chosen by the Otoshi-yori. The reason for this was twofold. First, to ensure the child received the most structured, correct upbringing for a future ruler, and second, to prevent the mother from gaining too much personal influence over her son. A strange and little-known detail of this process was the selection of the wet nurse, or Meinotu. This was an incredibly prestigious and politically important role. The wet nurse was often a woman from a respectable samurai family, chosen for her good health, strong character, and, most importantly, her family's political loyalties. She would often develop an incredibly close bond with the young lord, a bond that could last a lifetime and give her and her family immense influence when he eventually came to power. The bond between a shogun and his former wet nurse was often stronger than the one he had with his own biological mother. The question of whether the concubine mothers resented this separation is a matter of historical debate, given the cultural norms of the time, where aristocratic children were often raised by servants. It may have been accepted as normal. However, it is hard to imagine it was not a source of private pain. To go through the ordeal of pregnancy and childbirth, only to have your child largely raised by others, must have been a unique form of suffering. Some historians argue that this separation was the final, cruelest expression of the Ōoku's control, taking the one thing that should have been personal and turning it into an affair of state. Tain, now recovered undressing in her opulent quarters, experiences this strange mix of triumphant loss. She is powerful, wealthy, and secure. Her enemies can no longer touch her. They must bow to her and her son. She has won the game, but the prize feels hollow in some ways. She sees her son during scheduled times, holding him for a few precious hours before he is whisked away by his army of caretakers. She has brought a new player into the world, a future ruler, but he belongs more to the state than to her. She looks around her beautiful, silent rooms and understands the final irony of the Ōoku. She has reached the top of the pyramid, but she is still a prisoner, now bound not by walls of wooden paper, but by chains of gold and political necessity. For every story like Heiness, a spectacular rise from obscurity to power. There are 1,000 untold stories of the women who were left behind. The Ōoku was a pyramid, and for every woman who reached the sun-drenched peak, countless others languished in the shadows, their lives a long, slow fade into insignificance. These were the doubting the Hado, the withering flowers, the women who did not catch the shogun's eye, who failed to conceive, or who simply grew old. Your life as a genin gives you a front row seat to this quiet tragedy. You see the young, hopeful girls arrive, their faces full of ambition, and you see them 10, 20, 30 years later. The fire in their eyes has dimmed, replaced by a weary resignation. Consider the fate of a mid-ranking attendant, Inochiro, who was once on the list of potential concubines. For a few years, she was in the running. She perfected her skills in poetry and music. She maintained her beauty. She navigated the treacherous politics with care. But the shogun's gaze never fell upon her. Or perhaps it did, for one night. But he never called for her again. She is now in her late 20s or early 30s, considered past her prime. Her chances are gone. What becomes of her? She cannot leave. The Ōoku is a lifetime commitment. She cannot marry. She will spend the rest of her days in service, perhaps rising to a mid-level supervisory role, teaching new girls the rules she mastered so well. She will watch younger, more beautiful women surpass her, experiencing the brief flash of hope that she once felt. Her life becomes a long, drawn-out epilogue. She is a permanent resident of the gilded cage, a ghost haunting the scenes of her former ambition, even for a woman who did become a concubine. If she failed to produce an heir, her position was precarious. Once the shogun who favored her died or retired, her status plummeted. The new shogun would have his own favorites. She would be moved to a less desirable part of the Ōoku. Her staff and income reduced. She would become a retired concubine, a living relic of a past administration, treated with polite respect but holding no real power. The Ōoku had a specific section for these women, as well as for the ladies-in-waiting who had served a deceased shogun or his mother. This area, sometimes called the Nishi-no-Maru Western Bailey in some configurations of Edo Castle, was essentially a retirement home. Here, the women lived out their days in quiet obscurity. A particularly sad and little-known aspect of this was the fate of childless women who reached old age, with no children to care for them or powerful family connections forged through a successful heir. They were entirely dependent on the Ōoku's institutional charity. Their final years were often spent in loneliness. Their former glory a distant memory. A poignant detail is that many of these women would turn to religion, becoming devout Buddhists, chanting sutras and preparing for the next life. As this one had offered its final answer, the faint sound of chanting coming from the retirement quarters was a common, melancholic feature of the Ōoku's soundscape. The historical record is largely silent on these failed women. History, written by the victors, remembers the mothers of shoguns. It does not remember the woman who served tea for 40 years, or the concubine who had one night of glory and a lifetime of regret. Reconstructing their lives is a challenge for historians, who must rely on fragmented temple records where the women were buried, the occasional mention in a diary, or demographic analysis of the Ōoku's population. The debate continues on whether the Ōoku should be seen as a system that provided security for a large number of women who might have otherwise struggled, or as a cruel institution that wasted thousands of lives in a ruthless dynastic lottery. You see this process everywhere. You see the bitterness in the eyes of a middle-aged supervisor, the quiet grief of a retired concubine tending to her small bonsai tree. Their stories are a constant, unspoken warning. The Ōoku is a machine that consumes youth and ambition, and for every success story, there are mountains of quiet failures. You learn that the greatest tragedy in this place is not a dramatic death by poison, but the slow, silent death of hope. It is the realization that your story is already over, and all that is left is to live out the remaining chapters in shades of gray. In this high-pressure, isolated world, where every woman is a potential rival and paranoia is a survival skill, you might expect life to be a lonely, solitary affair, and for many, it is. But in the cracks of this rigid, competitive system, something beautiful and resilient often grows. Deep, profound, and fiercely loyal bonds between women. These relationships, born of shared struggle and mutual dependency, are the hidden heart of the Ōoku. As a jonin, your first and most important alliances are with the girls you work and sleep alongside. You are all in the same boat, enduring the same hardships. You learn to rely on each other. You cover for a friend who is sick. You share a secret stash of sweets. You offer a shoulder to cry on after a harsh scolding from a supervisor. These friendships are a vital buffer against the dehumanizing nature of the institution. They are a small pocket of warmth in a cold, indifferent world, but the most famous and complex of these relationships occurred among the higher-ranking women. This was the system of ki-mei, which translates loosely to contractual sisterhood. It was a formal, recognized bond between an older, senior lady-in-waiting, the older sister, and the younger, junior one, the younger sister. The older sister would take the younger under her wing, acting as her mentor, protector, and guide through the treacherous social landscape. She would teach her the finer points of etiquette, introduce her to powerful allies, and defend her from rumors and rivals. In return, the younger sister would owe her senior absolute loyalty and devotion. She would serve her, support her, and be a constant, faithful companion. This was far more than a simple friendship. It was a strategic alliance, a way of building a small, loyal faction in a world of shifting allegiances. The nature of these ki-mei bonds is a subject of intense fascination and scholarly debate. On the surface, they were a practical social arrangement, but many sources suggest they were often deeply emotional and, in some cases, romantic and physical. In a world with no men, it is only natural that women would turn to each other for the intimacy, love, and emotional support that all humans crave. These relationships provided a vital emotional outlet in a world of intense repression. A particularly interesting and little-known aspect of this was the ritualism that sometimes surrounded these bonds. Pairs would exchange vows, swap cups of sake in a ceremony mimicking a wedding, and even adopt special names to be used only between them. Some memoirs hinted all the markers of a romantic partnership: jealousy, letters, quarrels, and passionate reconciliations. Whether these relationships were seen by the women themselves as a substitute for heterosexual love, or as a valid and complete form of partnership in their own right, is a question we can never fully answer. The Ōoku authorities seem to have largely tolerated these relationships, as long as they didn't disrupt the social order or interfere with a woman's duties to the shogun. These bonds could be a powerful force for good, creating networks of mutual support that made life bearable. But they could also be a source of conflict. A rivalry between two senior ladies would automatically become a rivalry between their younger sisters. A woman might be pressured by her older sister to do something she felt was wrong, torn between her loyalty and her conscience. You see these relationships all around you. You see the fierce protectiveness in the eyes of a senior attendant as she watches over her young protégé. You see two women walking in the garden, their heads close together in intimate conversation, a small island of trust in a sea of suspicion. These bonds are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They show that even in the most unnatural and depressive of environments, people will find a way to connect, to love, and to create their own chosen families. The Ōoku was designed to isolate women, to make them compete with each other. But in a quiet act of rebellion, the women often refused to play by those rules. They built their own world within the walls of the cage, a world held together not by rules and ambition, but by the forbidden, unbreakable threads of female solidarity. The days in the Ōoku are long, and the years are even longer. The routine is crushing. The political maneuvering is exhausting. How did thousands of women endure a lifetime of this without losing their minds to boredom and despair? The answer lies in the rich and surprisingly vibrant cultural life they created for themselves, a world of refined pastimes, undelicate distractions, for the higher-ranking women with endless hours of leisure. Mastering the traditional arts was not just a hobby, but a core part of their identity and a battlefield for demonstrating their superiority. Calligraphy, or shodu, was paramount. A woman's handwriting was considered a direct reflection of her character and breeding. Hours were spent practicing the elegant brushstrokes, composing poetry, or copying sutras. A woman with beautiful handwriting was deeply admired. Music was another essential pastime. The sound of the koto, the long 13-stringed zither, was a constant, gentle presence in the halls of the Ōoku. Women also learned to play the shakuhachi, a bamboo flute, and the shamisen, a 3-stringed banjo-like instrument, though the latter was sometimes considered a bit too common, associated with the world of geishas and merchants. Then there were the games, but these were not simple board games. They were sophisticated contests of intellect and taste. The most famous was the incense guessing game, or kodo. Participants would be presented with a series of rare and expensive incense woods. Burned one by one, they would have to identify the specific scent, often giving it a poetic name based on a classic literary reference. It was a game that required a sensitive nose, a deep knowledge of literature, and an immense amount of training. It was the height of aristocratic refinement. Another popular and fiendishly difficult game was the shell matching game, or kae-was-the. This involved hundreds of clammed shells, exquisitely painted on the inside with matching scenes from a story, often the tale of Genji. The shells would be mixed up, and players would have to find the matching pairs. It was a test of memory, artistic appreciation, and knowledge of the classics. The sets of shells themselves were often priceless works of art, passed down through generations. A lesser-known but equally important pastime was the study and memorization of classic literature, particularly the great works of the Heian period like the Tale of Genji and the Pillow Book. These stories, written by court ladies 1,000 years earlier, provided a template for refined behavior and a shared cultural language for the women of the Ōoku. They would hold poetry competitions, where they would have to compose a verse on a given theme, a skill that was both a creative outlet and a weapon in their social battles. The question of whether these activities were a genuine source of joy or just another form of competitive pressure is debated by historians. On one hand, they surely provided a necessary intellectual and creative stimulus, a way to beautify a life of confinement. On the other hand, proficiency in these arts was a status symbol, and a lack of skill could be a source of shame and ridicule. A woman who played the koto poorly or used a clumsy phrase in a poem would be judged harshly by her peers. For you and the other lower-ranking servants, these refined pastimes are a world away. Your leisure time is short and precious. You might spend it mending your clothes, chatting with friends, or playing simpler games like Sugoroku, a type of board game, or with simple playing cards. That even for you, the cultural life of the Ōoku trickles down. You hear the music from the ladies' quarters. You see the beautiful calligraphy on display. And you absorb the stories and poems that are in the very air you breathe. This constant pursuit of beauty and refinement served a crucial psychological purpose. It was a way of imposing order, menu, and elegance onto a life that could otherwise feel pointless and empty. It was a way of saying, we may be prisoners, but we're not barbarians. We are women of culture. By filling their days with art, music, and poetry, the women of the Ōoku were not just passing the time. They were actively resisting the dehumanizing emptiness of their gilded cage. The Ōoku is a place of deep silence and whispered secrets, a perfect breeding ground for fear and imagination. As you spend more time within its walls, you become familiar with another, invisible layer of its reality, the world of ghosts, spirits, and superstitions. Every long, dark corridor seems to hold a memory, and some of those memories have teeth. The ghost stories of the Ōoku are unique, tailored to the specific anxieties of its residents. They are not usually tales of samurai warriors or vanquished enemies. They are overwhelmingly female, stories of women who suffered and died within these same walls. You hear the older servants tell them in hushed tones late at night. There is the story of the weeping concubine, the ghost of the woman who was passed over by the shogun and died of a broken heart. They say you can still hear her sobbing near the pond in the main garden on moonless nights. Then there is the more terrifying legend of the Okiku-ito, or Okiaika-swell. This is a classic Japanese ghost story, but it has a special resonance here. The story goes that a young serving maid named Okiku broke one of a set of 10 precious porcelain plates. As punishment, her master killed her and threw her body down a well. Now, her ghost rises from the well each night, mournfully counting the plates, 1 to 3 all the way to 9, before letting out the blood-cursed shriek of despair. In the Ōoku, where a broken dish could be a career-ending mistake, this story feels chillingly plausible. These tales serve a purpose. They are cautionary tales, morality plays that reinforce the rules of the Ōoku. They warn against jealousy, carelessness, and despair. They are a way of policing behavior through fear, a supernatural extension of the Otoshiwai, or is authority beyond the ghost stories. Everyday life is governed by a complex web of superstitions. There are lucky days and unlucky days for starting any new task, determined by an almanac that the senior ladies consult religiously. Certain numbers are considered deeply unlucky. Certain directions are to be avoided when sleeping. The women become experts in this esoteric knowledge, a folk religion that helps them feel a sense of control over their unpredictable lives. A particularly strange and little-known superstition was the fear of living ghosts, or Ikei-o. This was the belief that a person's spirit, if consumed by intense hatred or jealousy, could actually leave their body while they were still alive and inflict harm on their enemies. If a rival fell ill or suffered a misfortune, it might be blamed on the Ikei-o of another woman. This belief created an atmosphere where even a hateful thought could be seen as a tangible, dangerous weapon, adding another layer of psychological terror to the daily rivalries. Historians who study the folklore of the Ōoku, you see it as a rich text revealing the hidden psychological landscape of its inhabitants. The prevalence of female ghosts and stories of jealousy-fueled curses speaks volumes about the primary sources of stress and fear in their lives. The debate among scholars is whether these beliefs were a source of genuine terror and anxiety, or if they also served a more complex social function. Did telling ghost stories also create a sense of community and shared culture? Did believing in lucky charms and rituals provide a necessary psychological comfort, a way to cope with a reality that was otherwise out of their control? It was likely both. You, of course, Try to be rational. You tell yourself the strange creak in the floorboards is just the old wood of the castle, that the flickering shadow in the corner of your eye is just a trick of the lantern light. But in the deep of night, when you have to walk alone down a long, dark corridor to the latrine, the stories come flooding back. Every rustle of a paper screen, every hoot of a distant owl sounds like something else. You walk a little faster, your heart beating in your throat. The Ōoku is haunted, not just by the spirits of legend, but by the accumulated weight of centuries of female hope, ambition, and sorrow. The air itself feels heavy with unspoken stories. Whether the ghosts are real or not is almost irrelevant. In this place, the fear is real, and it is a constant, unseen resident in the long, silent corridors of the Shogun's forbidden harem. Life in the Ōoku feels eternal, a perfectly preserved world outside of time. The seasons change, the cherry blossoms bloom in fall, but the rigid hierarchy and the daily routine remain the same. But one day, this illusion of permanence is shattered. A new kind of rumor begins to circulate, a rumor of a different and more terrifying sort. The Shogun is gravely ill. The news is kept under a strict lockdown. The official line is that he is merely indisposed. But the Ōoku, with its hypersensitive network of whispers and observations, knows the truth. The number of doctors visiting the Shogun's private quarters increases. The highest-ranking Otoshi-yori are seen and hushed. Grim-faced conferences. The Shogun's mother and wife order prayers and rituals to be performed at the shrine, their faces etched with a gravity that betrays the official story. A strange, suspended atmosphere descends upon the complex. The usual rivalries and petty conflicts seem to fade into the background, replaced by a collective, anxious uncertainty. Every woman in the Ōoku, from the highest-ranking concubine to the lowest kitchen maid, understands that her entire world is balanced on the health of this one man. His death will trigger a political earthquake, and no one knows where the fault lines will run. For the women personally connected to him, his mother, his wife, his favored concubines like Hain, it is a time of genuine grief, mixed with raw political calculation. They are losing a son, a husband, a patron, but they are also about to lose their primary source of power. Their influence is directly tied to the living shogun. When he is gone, their status will be dramatically, irrevocably altered. Then, the inevitable happens. The official announcement is made. The shogun is dead. A formal, state-mandated period of mourning begins. The vibrant colors of the Ōoku disappear overnight. All the women, regardless of rank, must dress in plain white or gray mourning robes. All forms of entertainment, music, games, poetry gatherings are forbidden. The Ōoku becomes a silent, monochrome world of grief. The mourning is real for some, but for everyone, it is also a performance, a public demonstration of loyalty. A fascinating and poignant ritual associated with a shogun's death was the act of junshi, or following one's lord in death, a practice where close retainers would commit ritual suicide. While this was more common among male samurai retainers and had been officially discouraged by this point in the Edo period, a form of symbolic junshi occurred in the Ōoku. Upon the death of a shogun, his entire personal retinue of concubines and high-ranking attendants were expected to retire from the world by becoming Buddhist nuns. They would shave their heads, take new religious names, and move to a dedicated convent associated with the Tofugu family, where they would spend the rest of their lives praying for the soul of their deceased lord. This was the final act of service. The debate among historians is whether this was a voluntary act of devotion or a mandatory requirement. While it was framed as a great honor, it is hard to imagine that all of these women, many still young, willingly chose a life of monastic seclusion. It was more likely a political necessity, a way to gracefully remove the old garden to prevent them from interfering with the new administration. It was the ultimate demonstration that their lives and identities were completely tied to the man they served. For everyone else in the Ōoku, the shogun's death signals a massive power reset. A new shogun, perhaps Heine's young son, will be installed. This means his mother, Heim, will now become the Ōoku Koro, the Dowager Shoguness, the most powerful woman in the land. Her faction is now dominant. The Otoshi and attendants who were loyal to her will be promoted to the highest positions. Conversely, all the factions that had backed other potential heirs, or were loyal to the previous regime, will be demoted or purged. The former Ōoku Koro, the official wife of the dead shogun, if she is childless, will lose almost all her influence. The rivals who made Heine's life a living hell will now have to bow before her, their own futures hanging by a thread. The entire political map of the Ōoku is redrawn in a matter of days. You watch this massive upheaval from your lowly position. You change the colorful screens for plain white ones. You serve the simple morning meals. You see powerful women who once strode the halls with arrogance, now walking with their heads bowed, their faces full of fear. You see others, once minor players, now puffed up with new-found importance. It is a stark and brutal lesson in the nature of power. It is not owned. It is merely borrowed from the man at the top. And when he is gone, all debts are called in. The entire gilded cage has been shaken, and everyone is scrambling to find their new perch before the dust settles. Years pass. The boy heir, Heine's son, is now the shogun. Harem, once the nervous, unknown girl, is now the dowager, the great matriarch who rules the Ōoku with a firm but weary hand. The cycle has begun anew. New girls arrive with hope in their eyes. New concubines are chosen, and new rivalries simmer under the surface. The Ōoku, it seems, is an eternal institution, a perfect, unchanging world. But outside the castle walls, the world is changing in ways that no one inside the Ōoku can imagine. It begins as distant thunder. Rumors, more potent than any gossip about a rival concubine, start to filter in through the few cracks in the Ōoku's walls. Stories of strange, black ships, larger than any Japanese vessel, appearing off the coast. Stories of bearded, long-nosed barbarians from O and called America, demanding that Japan open its borders to trade. At first, these are just curious tales, dismissed by the powerful women of the Ōoku as matters for the men to handle. What does a foreign ship have to do with the choice of a kimono pattern, nor the appointment of a new lady-in-waiting? Their world is here, inside these walls. The outside is an abstraction. But the thunder gets louder. The political turmoil that these black ships unleash upon Japan begins to shake the very foundations of the shogunate. The government is thrown into crisis. There are debates, assassinations, and even small-scale civil wars between factions who want to resist the foreigners and those who believe Japan must modernize. The shogunate, which has ruled Japan with an iron fist for over 250 years, begins to show signs of weakness. This instability inevitably affects the Ōoku. The budget is cut. The extravagant lifestyle, the endless supply of silk and lacquerware, begins to shrink. The number of new servants being hired dwindles. For the first time, a sense of real-world anxiety penetrates the gilded cage. A strange and little-known aspect of this period was the Ōoku's role in the political debates. While they were cut off from the world, the women were not stupid. The high-ranking ladies, especially the Otoshi and the Dowager Hain, were shrewd political operators. They received information from their family members in the male government and tried to influence policy from behind the scenes, usually advocating for a more conservative, anti-foreign stance to protect the traditional world that gave them their power. Some historians argue that the Ōoku's intense conservatism and resistance to change was a significant factor in the shogunate's inability to adapt to the new global reality. Though this is a highly debated point, the end comes faster than anyone could have predicted. In the political firestorm, the forces loyal to the emperor in Kyoto, who had been a symbolic figurehead for centuries, rise up and overthrow the Tofugu shogunate. The era of the samurai is over. The emperor is restored to power, and Japan sets off on a frantic course of modernization. The shogunate is dissolved. The castle in Edo becomes the new imperial palace. Then the Ōoku, the ultimate symbol of the shogunate's power and decadence, is disbanded. The final days are a scene of quiet, bewildered chaos. The official decree is read. After more than 2 centuries, the residents are free to go. For the younger women, this is a moment of joyous liberation. They can go home, get married, and live a normal life. But for the older women, those who have known no other life, who have been here for 30, 40, or 50 years, it is a terrifying prospect. The world outside is alien to them. Their families are long gone. They have no skills, no place to go. The cage doors open, but they are afraid to fly out. You, now a woman in your middle years, stand in the courtyard and watch as the Ōoku is dismantled. Women are packing their meager belongings, saying their tearful goodbyes. The great ladies, stripped of their titles and their power, look small and lost. And the once mighty dowager is just another old woman, her future uncertain. The beautiful prison is finally empty. The paper screens are torn. The polished floors are dusty. The silence is different now. It is not the watchful, pregnant silence of before. It is the hollow, empty silence of a tomb. The grand social experiment is over. As you walk out of the unclean gate for the last time, you take one last look back at the labyrinth that consumed your life. The last of the cherry blossoms are falling in the untended gardens. A final, beautiful, and melancholy farewell to the lost world of the Shogun's forbidden harem. The story has ended, but let the feeling linger for a moment. The world of the Ōoku, with its silent corridors and shimmering silks, now dissolves. Let the sharp edges of its intrigue and the weight of its rules soften and fade away. You are no longer walking on those polished floors, no longer listening for the whispers in the halls. That world, with all its beauty and its sorrow, has receded into the past, becoming just a story, a dream that you are visiting. Feel the weight of that life lift from your shoulders. The concerns of Hain and the thousands of other women are not your concerns. Their anxieties belong to history, to the quiet dust that now settles in the empty rooms of Edo Castle. You are floating away from it now, drifting back from that distant shore of time. Your own bed is here, a safe harbor. The gentle hum of the fan is just a fan, not the sound of unseen attendants. The shadows in your room are just shadows, not the ghosts of weeping concubines. Let the last remnants of the story break apart like mist in the morning sun, leaving behind only a sense of peace, a quiet stillness. You are drifting, gently, into a deeper, more restful space, a place where stories end and true sleep begins.